alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is returning guest, back for round 2, VK Tritschler. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, nice to see you again.
It's been well, not that long since you were last here. I lose track of time, though. It is the after... We're living in the afterscape, let me put it that way. It's COVID times. Still, is this season ever going to end? But anyway, yeah, you've got a new book coming out, and yeah, tell people a little bit about it and yourself.
Sure. So, my background is I'm based in Australia, but I'm half Kiwi, half Canadian, or Kiwi-Adian, as my brother called us. And we moved over to Australia about 5 years ago, and that's really where my writing career started from. Prior to that, I'd kind of dabbled. I did a lot of reading, but not a lot of writing. And I was really fortunate because we have a very strong author base in my local town, and we have some amazing authors already here to utilize some skill sets from. And so got into the writing thing. A couple of years ago, launched my first book. And since then, it's been gangbusters, really. I've got a publisher based in America. I do predominantly romance, although different subgenres of romance. And my new book coming out is called A Town Called Nowhere, and it's based here in Australia. And it's a little bit of fun on the paranormal romance. I wanted to bring into it a new version of reality for Australians. A friend of mine who's an author, she'd given me a bunch of we call them plot poker. It's basically cards which have characteristics or traits or stories or like bits and pieces of a storyline. You pull them randomly out, you assign them, you start writing. That's the concept of it. It's to get you going, and it's like a writing prompt thing. And as I was writing, I thought, actually, this is sounding kind of cool. I'm enjoying this. And then I was at home, I was watching TV, and they had a thing come up about these people who are tracking down panthers in Australia. They believe that somehow randomly panthers got released from a circus, or I don't know. I don't even know how that logistically would happen, but they're convinced that somewhere in Australia, in the wilderness, there are a bunch of black panthers roaming around eating stuff, and they're trying to find them. So I thought, wouldn't it be kind of cool if I took the random story that I started and then work in how there actually were panthers, and hence the reason that people are seeing panthers in Australia is because there's actually people that can change into panthers in Australia. And that's how it started. And it was originally only ever going to be one book. Like when I started, I'm like, yeah, it's just going to be one book. I'm just having a bit of fun. And then I remember I was at a writer's retreat with some author friends of mine, and I came out for the dinner session, and I sat down and I said, I don't know how I'm going to end this in time. And they went, what? And I'm like, well, it started out, it was only going to be one book, and now I'm halfway through, and I've got so many loose ends and so much stuff going on, and the characters are like totally busy. I don't know how I'm going to wrap this up in time. And they're like, well, yeah, just see how you go. And then I got like 3/4 of the way through. I'm like, no, it's not one book. This is definitely not one book. This is more books. So this is the first book of what I've plotted out for 3 books. And it's really the introduction to the characters, the introduction to the new pack that they create, and the setting and the world that they're living in, and that initial introduction to the rather interesting dynamic that sits. Because, as I'm writing it down, I'm thinking about the logistics of being a pack of cats. Obviously, cats don't typically get along particularly well. So I get to have a bit of a play with the whole concept of having big cats and what that would mean, and what kind of flow and effect that would have for personality wise. So yeah, it's been a really fun write. I've enjoyed it. I've still got more to go, obviously. But yeah, it's one I'm particularly proud of because it's a little bit different and outside the square. So I like that.
Cool. Yeah, and the random generation though, that's interesting. Just pull a card, get a series, I guess. I mean, when combined with that story from the television. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, to be honest, there's some. I think the hardest thing as an author is new plotline generation, and so we, as a group, like as a group of authors in our local vicinity, we do tend to do a lot of writing sessions together where we can start the generation of ideas, and whether that's randomly assigned, whether that's looking at a picture and grabbing something from that, or listening to music and grabbing something from that, or it's really important to just keep coming up with these concepts, because even if you start writing it and you're like, no, it's rubbish, I don't like it, it can lead to other things.
Yeah.
And it can sometimes be just a couple of sentences out of a whole couple of pages that you've just written that then become a keystone for something else that you go on to write, because it's that generation of ideas and keeping the fresh to what you're doing, because it's very easy to find something that you do find it really easy and get stuck into that mode of just writing the same thing over and over again. So for me, it's really important that you keep it fresh, bring some new perspective, new idea, new concept.
Yeah, definitely. I get bored super easily, and even though I like my books, I have a hard time, like you said, generating a plot line is something I kind of abandoned doing it. I mean, I discover it as I go, but that so far is, it works, but it's also a lot of work on the go. Where I just write what happens next until I get to the ending that I kind of had in mind, basically. Yep. And that can be kind of tricky to keep going. And sometimes you need this, and it's easy to get stuck in ruts there too. So that's why I've been kind of looking for a slight upgrade to that. And I actually think having some kind of idea generation outside of myself is a good way to go. And I use dice more than other people or cards or anything. I use like random number generators and stuff to pick from lists of things that I think could go in the story. Sometimes,
sure.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the random stuff. But it's, and that's on the micro level, right? Like I don't tend to generate a whole book. I generate like the next thing that I think about when I think about what I'm gonna write. And even then, sure. You got to be flexible because sometimes it's not gonna make any sense. I can't, there's not just suddenly gonna be a car chase in it. And you can't have 3 of them in a row either if you kept rolling the dice.
Yeah. But it could be, and this is what I find the beauty of with these random assignments is that you are thrown in the deep end. So your brain gets ticking on the concept. And even if you don't use that whole thing, it could be just the idea or the baseline idea of it that later on when you're writing a book, you're like, okay, oh, actually, I've already got some of that scene. I've already written some of that scene because this is what I did in my random generation. And then you can grab that and you can adjust it to fit into what you need it to go into for your actual book. So for me, those little writing snippets and prompts along the way not only keep the brain going, but then provide invaluable information that you can use later on and feed into what you're wanting to do, depending on, where you're at in the story. So... yeah, I find them really priceless and a good way of keeping going with the writing so it doesn't become too monotonous. It breaks that cycle of thought that you get stuck in.
There's one other thing that's reminded me of. Another way that I get stuck in books, and I've noticed that sometimes it can be, I can notice it that sometimes a story I'm reading will be stuck in kind of a time frame thing where you're like, we're basically we just literally are seeing the next thing that happens, everything that happens, even if it's not important or useful or if it takes the story in a weird direction. And does that ever happen to you, or do you have any way to deal with that kind of thing where you're stuck in time in the story?
Yeah, look, I think it happens for every author, and sometimes as you're writing, and again, perhaps a little bit dependent on if you're a visual author or an audio author. Like I'm a visual author, so I see the story unraveling and then write it down. And it's a bit like, watching the back end of a movie before they do the cuts, where the actors are kind of wandering around and doing stuff, and you're like, yeah, that's going to get cut out of the movie, but I'll put it in here in the meantime. And then you kind of identify it, and later on you'll cut it back down. But again, it is good to break out of that habit, because I think if you get stuck in that too much, you lose the traction that you're getting in the storyline, and that ability from the reader then to be able to keep going emotionally drops off. The more kind of mundane stuff that you end up adding back in unnecessarily. So yeah, if sometimes I do feel if I'm dropping off on the story, or I feel like I'm not bringing something to the story when I'm writing in it, I'll actually just put it down completely, grab something completely fresh, have another crack, and then go back to it later on and pick it up. And quite often that refreshes where you're at, because it's a bit like cleaning the palette.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. I get it's actually, I mean, among my other problems that I've been having lately, I just recently finished a fantasy novel. I was writing an epic the third novel in this fantasy series, and I got that released on the 4th of April, 3rd or 4th, whatever, depends on where you are. And then I had this other pre-order set up, because I'm insane, that is for just, due 20 days later. Oh, okay, great. I'd already written a good chunk of the book, most of the book even. But then I'm like, oh man, but it's a totally different genre, different setting, everything. It's science fiction. I mean, not that different from fantasy, but still quite different in feel. And I just suddenly, oh boy, how do I write these characters again? Jumping between the two wasn't easy.
Yeah.
But it can't. Yeah. But it's still nice. It does feel fresh. So yeah, that's definitely still true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be really tricky, because sometimes it takes you a wee while just to get back into the mindset of the characters and where they're at and their life story and stuff. But like, I tend to, at any one time, I got 3 or 4 books on the go, and I tend to write based on what mood I'm in. If I'm feeling happy, a rom-com's great. Like, I can jump into a rom-com and it's like, oh, this is easy. The melancholic stuff, you're having a really rubbish day at work, you get into like your thriller, you're like, yeah, where you can delve into the darkness. That kind of thing's quite fun. But it's the $1 million thing, that you have to write what you enjoy. If you're not enjoying your work, why bother? So if it means that you have to put down what you're doing to just do something completely off the wall, just to keep yourself going and to keep yourself entertained, do it. Who knows what can come from complete randomness? Yeah.
Yeah, here. That's great advice. I second that. Yeah, definitely bouncing around. I mean, if you're not entertaining yourself, how are you going to entertain your reader? That's kind of an old salt, but it's true. If you're just going through the motions, people are going to notice eventually. Unless you do some serious editing and go back through with some passion for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I do feel for those authors that find themselves in a bind where, they're stuck in a genre, they're stuck in a way of writing because, that's what the readership demands. Well, I look at like J.K. Rowling, I'm like, God, that must have been so hard for her to have written these Harry Potter series, and then like, emotionally she wants to go and try different things and do different genres, and they're like, nope, you have to write this.
We only want the Harry Potter.
Yeah. So, because as an author, I don't think any of us really particularly want to get stuck in it either. Yeah. We want to do it because we're enjoying it, and we love engaging in that world, but we don't want to get stuck in the world either. You don't want to be trapped as an author in any particular world or creation of your own. So it is a tough one, and sometimes just the randomness of having a completely different prompt pulls you out of the world that you're stuck in, gives you a fresh look at it, and then you can go back into it and improve it on your second go. So
tunnel vision isn't helpful, at least not all the time. Sometimes tunnel vision can get the book done, but if you're tunneling through and you can't see where you even started, you may be in trouble. Might be worth poking your head out of the sand for a second. to maybe mix metaphors here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've had books where I've got a good way into it, and then I've just had to put it down and leave it for a bit, because I'm not seeing the end. You know,
Yeah.
I've stopped seeing the direction the book's going, and I'm starting to flail, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to put it down. I'll pick it up again in 6 months' time. I'll have another look at it. If I feel like it's lost what I wanted to get from it, I'll bin it. Like, sometimes you got to be harsh.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to be cruel to be kind. But other times, you might pick it back up again in 6 months and say, oh yeah, okay, I can see where I was heading. This is where it fell off. Let's cut it from here and restart. And sometimes that gives you that direction back again. Or the idea regrows in a new form.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of ideas. Like, I went through a phase 5 or 6 years ago where I basically didn't finish anything. I wrote maybe 50,000 words in a bunch of different books, and none of them were finished. And that was just, I look back at that, I'm like, wow, those are really cool worlds and ideas, and I'm coming back to some of them. But mostly those words are like, they're just not useful anymore. They're different than what I'd write now if I was doing it again. And also now I'm writing fast enough, it's not really a big deal to replace them, which is nice. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's funny. Like, I remember a couple of months ago, I was catching up with some authors, and one of them had found these old books of like ideas that they'd written down. She's like, oh my God, I found this book, and I opened it up, and for a second I didn't even know who'd written it, and then I realized it was me, and it was old ideas that I had.
That's magic, that is.
And she's like, some of them were quite good. I mean, some of them were rubbish, but some of them were like, yeah. She's like, oh, I got excited about it again.
I have so many notebooks like that. Yeah, I have so many that if I was cycling through them all, I think I would forget about the first one before I got to the end of the last one. That's the kind of thing. Because I would because back when, I think I may have mentioned this on the podcast on a different show, but when I was in high school, I would bring 2 notebooks to class, right? When I was a teenager, and I would bring one notebook would be for the notes for class, and the other notebook would be for my story ideas.
Oh, that's cool.
And it kept me from getting bored.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe it didn't help my grades though. Half the time,
that's debatable.
Yeah, it could have been either way, honestly.
Yep. Oh, but look, that's now a priceless antique that,
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's priceless now, and there's a difference.
When 100 years from now, when we're all gone and people are reading your books, they will be trying to track down those notebooks.
We should be so lucky. Yes, anyone should be so lucky that should happen. That their notebooks and their weird sketches and stuff are going to be valuable someday. I mean, that's
every
an interesting thought.
Dream.
Yeah, it is indeed. Yes. Though there's authors out there. I mean, not to split hairs here, but there's some authors out there who are like, whatever. I don't care what happens to my books after I'm gone. And I'm not sure if I believe that completely, but sometimes viewing your books as less important is also helpful for making them easier to approach when writing, and I find that pretty cool. I think that's a useful way to look at things, because if you're just fooling around and that's how you see yourself, well, then there's no weight on it, and you can just keep going.
Yeah. And I think it probably takes the sting out of some of the reviews and stuff that come back.
Boy, yeah.
Because we all get those days where you're like living life on the high lane, and you're like, yay, everything's great, and then you get that like review, and you're like, oh God, oh, that's terrible. What am I doing with my life? Yeah.
Yeah. Geez, I got one of those recently too. Actually, just a few days ago. It's tough. Reviews are, especially when they're like, oh, I get notified basically every time there's a review on one of my books, and I can't turn that off, because it's just like, if I'm looking at my stats and stuff and trying to figure out where to go next, I'm gonna see it, and it is not pleasant. It is not good when one of those reviews comes back at anything critical. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
It's enough to make me drink, except I don't drink much.
But it's hard, but I think every author goes through it, and then it gives you a little bit of perspective too. Sometimes what I'll do just for fun is I'll go into like Goodreads, and I'll look up super famous authors, and then I'll look at their reviews and read their 1-star reviews and go, thank the Lord, it's not just me. Everybody gets them. Because, sometimes you have those days where you get like a really rubbish review and you're like, oh, wow, it really makes you reconsider what you're doing.
Yes.
And it's good to get a little bit of perspective and realize that, hey, look, everybody's not going to love what you do. Mm-hmm. Not everybody's going to read what you do. But yeah, you've got to do it because you love it and it's something that you enjoy and that you're engaged with, and that your readership, as they pick it up, can then read that you've got that engagement and that enjoyment. It's an interesting one because at the time it doesn't feel particularly great to get a rough review, but later on, looking back on it, it actually builds you as an author, and it makes you want to write better and want to make a different story the next time and change things up to improve it. So
yeah, that's a good point. That's a really healthy way to think about it, I believe. Yeah. I now I just need to think that way myself. No.
But yeah, I mean, if you look back at the stuff you started writing
mm-hmm.
way back when, and then you compare it to where you are now and what you're doing now, and you think of it as like a growth journey,
Mm-hmm.
So this is how I've improved, and this is how I got to where I got to, and it's a bit like in a job, and I use that term loosely. As you get feedback from your manager about stuff you might not have done well or things you could improve on, that's how you change and grow and become better at what you're doing. And it's the same thing for us as authors. As we're getting feedback and reviews through, it's an opportunity for us to not look at it as a, oh my God, end of the world scenario, but to say, okay, this is an opportunity for me to improve. And what's the feedback they're giving me? So looking through the, hideousness of it, what's the actual feedback that they're saying here?
Yeah.
Are they wanting more character development? Are they wanting certain plot lines to be looked at greater? Am I missing something in that process that's making it hard for them to relate to the characters, so that next time when you're developing those characters, you're bringing that out more and you're working on that more than you would have in your previous one? And that's how you grow. That's how you develop as an author. So
yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I would just say preach on. That's great. I don't have much to add beyond that, but it is interesting. I mean, when the reviews, because there's a couple different kinds of reviews that I can think of, and some of them are what you were saying there, that you can take stuff out of them, and others are just weird. Frankly, everyone's going to get both, I think. Some of the ones where it's like, did you read the book? Or maybe that's not a thing. There's a lot of different variety of reviews. And of course, there's plenty of good ones mixed in there.
Yep.
But yeah. Anyway, that may be enough about that, but go on. You were saying.
Yeah. No, I always find it interesting, though, when you get a review from somebody who says, oh, I couldn't finish the book, but then they're really specific about the bits of the book they didn't like. And there's a little bit of me that goes, did you really not finish it, or did you finish it and then decide you didn't like it, so that you could say, oh, I didn't like it enough, so I didn't finish it, but you did finish it? Because it's pretty specific.
Like toward the end stuff? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, this was so bad, I wish I hadn't finished it.
But they still did, which then leads you to if they read all the way through it, even if they didn't like it, they still read all the way through it. So
like,
to get to the end.
Yeah. That's like, was it Dan Brown? That's one of my trigger words and trigger names. But Dan Brown. I read a ton of Dan Brown books when I was a teenager, and I didn't like any of them, but I read them all.
Absolutely. Yep. So he's still won, I'm afraid. That's still a win.
Dan Brown 5, Tim 0. Yeah. I think it's at least 5. That was a lot of books. Anyway, back then I pretty much read everything he had out at the time.
Yeah, well, there you go. There's a classic example. Yeah, you didn't like his writing, but you still read all of his books.
Yep.
So there's a part of it that appeals too. Yeah.
There's something to it, yeah. You can't discount them completely if they're gonna, even if you don't, even if I can't, I'm gonna complain about them 15 years later. I'm not. There's something to him. He did something right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, but yeah, look, being an author is hard. It's not an easy job. Like anyone that comes in here thinking that it's all going to be unicorns and rainbows and fluffy, it's not. It's apocalypse now scenario. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, they're going to chop up a cow at some point in this movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not going to make a whole ton of sense necessarily.
Exactly. And there'll be points where there's napalm involved. So, like, you've got to kind of run with the punches a little bit and do it because it makes you feel happy. You're enjoying it. As an author. It's something that you feel compelled to do. And then run with that, because that is the truest form of writing. If you look back in history, authors through time wrote because they felt compelled to do it, even against some significant adversity in some cases. Yeah. You look at particularly authors like in Russia, etc., where the Great Purge went. It's one of those things that you do it because you love it. So keep doing what you love. The readership is part of it. But really, it's I hate to say it is a little bit of a selfish act in getting through the process of getting the story out of your head and onto the page.
If not selfish, there's a kind of level of peace you need to have about the process. That you have got to kind of, in the sense of inner peace, that you can't be invested in how the book does for readers completely. That can't be the only reason you're doing it, because if it is, then you're putting yourself out there to get clobbered, basically. It's not a safe way to write a book. Yeah. But
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But we're running low on time, so VK Tritschler, remind us where we can find your work, and thanks for being on the podcast. It's been fun.
No worries. Always a pleasure to catch up with you. So the easiest place to find me is my website, www.vktritschler.com. And I'm sure you'll probably put a link up, because I've got a surname. It's a bit like yours. It's difficult to spell.
A lot of consonants in yours.
But yeah, that's where I keep most of my information in sort of a one-stop shop scenario. So you can find links for my socials, etc., through there, and whatever your preference is going forward. But it's also where I update, what's coming and new books out and all that jazz. So
excellent, convenient. And as for this podcast, you can find us at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can find more about me on on that same page, but not a whole ton, because I have not updated in a while, except for the podcast feeds. And and you can find my books on Amazon.com or the print books wherever fine print-on-demand books are distributed. So yeah, thanks for listening, folks. Talk to you soon. And, I think I got everything. Yeah, that's everything. Bye.
That tears it.